Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear hoodies. Every night, in children's hospitals across America, something extraordinary happens. Security cameras mysteriously go dark. Footsteps echo through quiet halls. And children who seem to have lost all hope suddenly find the strength to fight another day. For years, the stories spread like whispers, a tall figure appearing in darkened rooms. Basketball techniques transformed into battle strategies against illness. Medical bills quietly paid. Lives mysteriously changed. But at Hope Memorial Children's Hospital, nurse Sarah Chen is about to discover the truth behind these midnight visits. What she finds will change not only her life, but the lives of countless children around the world. Because sometimes the greatest acts of kindness happen in secret, and the most powerful legends are born in the quietest moments of the night. Sarah Fei. Chen had worked the night shift at Hope Memorial Children's Hospital for 15 years, but she'd never seen anything quite like this. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m., and the children's ward was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines and the gentle hum of the air conditioning. She was doing her usual rounds, checking on each sleeping child, when she saw something strange at the end of the hallway. A tall figure in a dark hoodie was slipping through the shadow-filled corridor like a ghost. Sarah's heart jumped. She'd been trained to spot trouble, and unknown visitors after hours definitely counted as trouble. But something about the way the figure moved made her pause before hitting the security alarm. The stranger wasn't sneaking. They were trying not to wake the children. "Excuse me," she called out softly, not wanting to disturb her sleeping patients. But when she reached the spot where the figure had been, they were gone. The hallway was empty. Sarah frowned and pulled out her phone to check the security cameras. The screen showed nothing but static. That was odd. The hospital had just upgraded their security system last month. She tried different cameras, but they were all showing the same fuzzy gray screen. "Everything okay, Sarah?" Jorge, the night security guard, appeared at her side. His flashlight beam cut through the dimness of the hallway. "I thought I saw someone," Sarah said, showing him her phone. "But the cameras are acting up." Jorge scratched his head. "Yeah, they've been doing that lately. Always at night, always around this time. Tech team can't figure it out." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "And you didn't think that was strange?" Jorge shrugged, but there was something in his expression that made Sarah think he knew more than he was saying. "Nothing's ever missing. No trouble. Just, well, come see for yourself." He led her to 6-year-old Emily's room. Emily had been admitted 3 weeks ago with a rare bone disease that left her in constant pain. But now, the little girl was sleeping peacefully, a small smile on her face. Next to her bed was something that hadn't been there during Sarah's last check. A brand new teddy bear wearing a tiny basketball jersey. "That's not the only one," Jorge whispered, leading her to more rooms. In each one, Sarah found similar scenes. 9-year-old Marcus, who hadn't smiled in days, was hugging a basketball signed by his favorite team. Lisa, who'd been too weak to get out of bed yesterday, had new sneakers by her bedside, exactly her size, in her favorite colors. David, who'd been having panic attacks about his upcoming surgery, was sleeping soundly with a peaceful expression and a letter on his bedside table. "This has happened before?" Sarah asked, carefully picking up the letter. The handwriting was neat but simple, as if written for a child to read easily. "Dear David, remember what I told you about being brave? It's okay to be scared. Everyone gets scared. But you're stronger than you know. Think of it like a basketball game. Sometimes you're behind, but that just means it's time for a comeback. I'll be checking on you again soon. Your friend, the Angel Man. Been going on for months, Jorge admitted. Different nights, different kids, but always the same pattern. Security cameras go dark for exactly 45 minutes. When they come back on, the kids have gifts. And the next day? He smiled. Well, you'll see. The next morning, Sarah could hardly believe what she was seeing. Emily, who usually cried through her physical therapy, was determined to try walking. Marcus was telling jokes to the other kids in the playroom. Lisa was sitting up in bed, describing a dream where she learned to dunk a basketball. And David, who'd been terrified of his surgery, was telling everyone how he was going to be making a comeback. "The Angel Man told me I'm stronger than I know," David said proudly, showing off his letter to anyone who would look. Sarah spent her break searching the hospital records. Similar incidents had been reported at other children's hospitals across the country. Always the same pattern: security cameras going dark, mysterious gifts appearing, and children suddenly showing remarkable improvement. But it wasn't just the gifts. The kids talked about their visitor, a tall man who spoke to them about courage, and Hope, who taught them secret moves to fight their illnesses, who made them feel like champions instead of patients. At the nurse's station, Sarah started a journal. On the first page, she wrote, "The mysterious visitor. What we know. Appears late at night. Very tall. Wears dark clothes and a hoodie. Knows basketball security cameras malfunction during visits. Leaves gifts and encouragement. Children call him the Angel Man. Visits multiple hospitals. Never seen clearly. Seems to know exactly what each child needs," as she wrote. "Doctor." Thompson stopped by her desk. "Sarah, have you seen Emily's latest test results? Her inflammation markers are down significantly, and David's anxiety levels before surgery were the lowest we've ever recorded." Sarah looked up from her journal. "Do you believe in angels, Dr. Thompson?" The doctor smiled mysteriously. "I believe in hope, Sarah. And sometimes hope wears sneakers." That night, Sarah volunteered for an extra shift. She was determined to solve this mystery. As she walked the IFADU quiet halls, she kept her eyes open and her phone ready. At exactly 11:47 p.m., her phone screen went dark. In the distance, she heard the soft squeak of basketball shoes on the polished floor. Sarah Chen smiled and began to walk toward the sound. Whoever this mysterious visitor was, she was going to find out. But one thing was already clear. Sometimes the most powerful medicine didn't come in bottles or through IVs. Sometimes it came wearing a hoodie, carrying hope in a basketball jersey, and moving through the dark halls like a guardian angel in sneakers. As she turned the corner, she caught a glimpse of something that made her stop in her tracks. On the wall was a shadow she recognized from countless posters and commercials. A shadow of a man who seemed to be flying, arms stretched out, legs scissored in an unmistakable pose. But when she reached the spot, the hallway was empty. The only evidence that anyone had been there was a fresh set of footprints, size 13, slowly fading from the freshly waxed floor. In her pocket, her phone screen flickered back to life. The security cameras were working again, but Sarah Chen didn't need cameras anymore. She had a feeling she knew exactly who their mysterious visitor was. The real question was, why would someone so famous choose to visit sick children in secret? She had no way of knowing then that this was just the beginning of a mystery that would change not only her life, but the lives of countless children at Hope Memorial. The Angel Man would return, and when his true identity was finally revealed, it would be more incredible than anyone could have imagined. The morning after Sarah's late-night encounter, Hope Memorial received a new patient who would change everything. 8-year-old Tommy Martinez arrived clutching a worn basketball and trying hard not to cry. "Mom, I don't want to stay here," Tommy whispered, his small hand gripping his mother Maria's sleeve. The basketball under his other arm was scuffed and well-loved, covered in signatures from his school teammates. Maria Martinez looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her waitress uniform was wrinkled from her overnight shift at the diner. "Mijo, the doctors here are going to help you get better. It's just for a little while." Sarah watched from the nurse's station as Dr. Thompson explained Tommy's diagnosis to Maria. The words "aggressive leukemia" and "immediate treatment" floated down the hallway. Maria's shoulders shook as she signed the admission papers with trembling hands. "I'll pick up extra shifts at the grocery store," Maria was saying, "and maybe Janet at the salon will let me work Sundays too." Sarah's heart ached. She'd seen this too many times. Single parents stretching themselves thin, trying to afford treatment. But something about Tommy was different. Maybe it was the way he kept dribbling his basketball even in the hospital bed, or how he asked if the IV pole could be moved so he could practice his shooting form. "You play basketball?" Sarah asked as she set up his monitoring equipment. Tommy's face lit up. "Every day. Well, until now." His smile faded. "My coach says I could make varsity when I'm older. I've been practicing my fadeaway shot." Fadeaway. "Shot? That's pretty advanced for someone your age," Sarah said, adjusting his pillows. "Michael Jordan made it famous," Tommy explained, his eyes bright with excitement. "I watched all his games on YouTube. Did you know he scored 38 points in the NBA Finals when he had the flu? If he could play while being sick, then maybe I can too." Sarah paused, remembering the tall shadow she'd seen last night. Before she could respond, Tommy's first round of chemotherapy began. The next few days were hard. Tommy tried to stay positive, but the treatments left him weak and sick. His beloved basketball sat untouched in the corner of the room. Maria visited whenever she could, rushing in between shifts, always bringing Tommy's favorite comics and trying to hide how tired she was. "I heard him crying last night," Jorge, the security guard, told Sarah during their coffee break. "Poor kid was trying to be quiet about it, but you know how it is." Sarah nodded. She'd seen too many young athletes face the possibility of never playing again. But Tommy's case was hitting her particularly hard. That evening, as Sarah was updating Tommy's charts, she overheard him talking to his mom on the phone. "It's okay, Mom. You don't have to come tonight. I know you have to work." Tommy's voice was brave, but Sarah could hear it shaking. "I'm okay. Really. The nurses are nice, and maybe tomorrow I'll be strong enough to practice my shots." After he hung up, Sarah peeked into his room. Tommy was holding his basketball, trying to spin it on one finger like he'd seen players do on TV. But his hands were shaking too much, and the ball kept falling. "Stupid medicine," he muttered, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "Stupid cancer." That night, at exactly 11:47 p.m., Sarah's phone screen went dark. She smiled, knowing what it meant. But this time, instead of investigating, she made sure the hallway to Tommy's room was clear. The next morning, Tommy was different. His eyes were bright, and he was sitting up in bed, holding something new. A pristine Chicago Bulls jersey with the number 23. "Sarah! Sarah!" he called out when she came in. "The Angel Man visited me last night. He taught me a secret way to fight the cancer cells. He said to imagine them as the other team, and my white blood cells are my teammates, and we're down by 2 points in the finals." Sarah noticed something else. A letter on his bedside table, written in that same neat, simple handwriting she'd seen before. "Dear Tommy, champions aren't made when things are easy. They're made when things are tough. Your body is going through the hardest game of its life, but you've got the heart of a champion. Here's a secret. Every night before bed, practice these visualization drills we talked about. Your mind is stronger than any medicine. Keep fighting, MVP, your friend, the Angel Man PS. Your mom's medical bills have been taken care of? A champion needs his coach by his side, not working 3 jobs. Sarah had to step out of the room to wipe her eyes. When she returned, Tommy was demonstrating his new visualization techniques to his mother, who had arrived looking confused but relieved after receiving a call from the hospital's billing department. "Mom, the Angel Man said I should imagine my medicine as a power-up, like in video games, and he showed me how to do breathing exercises, just like the pros do before big games. And look, he said this jersey is for champions only." Maria looked at Sarah questioningly, but Sarah just smiled. She thought about the shadow she'd seen, the size 13 footprints, and now this Bulls jersey. The pieces were coming together, but the biggest question remained. Why would someone of his stature choose to remain anonymous? As she watched Tommy teaching his visualization techniques to other kids on the ward, Sarah realized something important. This wasn't just about gifts or paid bills. The Angel Man was giving these children something more valuable: hope, delivered in a language they could understand, from someone who knew what it meant to fight against the odds. That afternoon, as Sarah was finishing her shift, she heard laughter from the children's playroom. Tommy was there, his IV pole beside him, showing a group of younger patients how to spin a basketball. He was still weak, still pale, but his eyes were shining. "You have to believe you can do it," he was saying. "The Angel Man told me that's the most important part. Even Michael Jordan had to practice." Sarah Chen smiled, adding another note to her growing journal about the mysterious visitor. One thing was becoming clear. Their Angel Man wasn't just any basketball player, but as she would soon discover, the true scope of his secret mission was far bigger than anyone at Hope Memorial could have imagined. Sarah's journal was getting thicker by the day. She'd started documenting every detail about the mysterious visits, creating a pattern that was both fascinating and puzzling. Tonight, she sat at the nurse's station, adding her latest observations. Visit. Pattern, always between 11:45 p.m. and 12:30 a.m., security cameras out for exactly 45 minutes. Footprints, size 13, athletic shoes. Height, estimated from shadow, 6'6". Never appears when media is present. Seems to know children's medical histories. Gifts always perfectly matched to each child. "More detective work?" Jorge asked, setting down a cup of coffee next to her notes. His usual playful smile was replaced with something more serious. "Jorge," Sarah said, closing her journal. "You know who it is, don't you?" The security guard shifted uncomfortably. "Let's just say, some secrets are worth keeping, especially when they're helping kids like Tommy." As if on cue, they heard the sound of a basketball bouncing from the children's playroom. Despite the late hour, Tommy was up, practicing his visualization techniques with several other patients. Ever since the Angel Man's visit, he'd become like a different child. Still sick, still fighting the aggressive cancer, but with a spirit that seemed unbreakable. 3, 2, 1. Tommy counted down, shooting his basketball into the modified hoop they'd set up. The ball went in with a satisfying swish. The other children cheered. "See?" Tommy said, retrieving the ball. "The Angel Man says every treatment is like scoring points against cancer. Right now, I'm winning by 12. Sarah watched as Tommy taught Lisa, the girl with new sneakers, how to shoot. His IV pole was right beside him, chemotherapy drugs flowing into his system, but his smile never wavered. "Did you know Tommy told his small audience that Michael Jordan got cut from his high school basketball team, but he didn't give up. The Angel Man says that's what makes a real champion, getting back up when things are tough. Sarah noticed something interesting. Every child the Angel Man visited seemed to receive not just gifts, but a personalized message of hope. For Tommy, it was basketball. For Emily, it was dance. For David, it was superhero stories. Each message was perfectly tailored to what would inspire that particular child. Later that night, Sarah decided to do some research. She borrowed Tommy's tablet and started looking up basketball statistics. Height, 6.6. Shoe size, 13. Famous for the fadeaway shot. Known for playing through illness. The evidence was adding up, but then she found something else. Similar stories. From children's hospitals in Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and even overseas. The same pattern. Security cameras going dark, mysterious gifts appearing, children showing remarkable improvement. How does he do it? Sarah wondered aloud. These visits are happening all over the country, sometimes on the same night. She was so absorbed in her research that she almost missed the familiar flicker of her phone screen. 11:47 p.m. The cameras were going dark. This time, Sarah was ready. She quietly made her way to the basketball court they'd set up in the physical therapy room. Sure enough, she heard the soft squeak of sneakers on the polished floor. She stayed in the shadows, watching. As a tall figure in a dark hoodie worked with a young patient named Marcus, the man's face was hidden, but his voice was gentle as he taught Marcus breathing exercises to help with his anxiety. See? Just like preparing for a big game, the figure said softly. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Every breath makes you stronger. Sarah held her breath, not wanting to interrupt. The visitor spent exactly 7 minutes with Marcus before moving on to the next room. In each room, he seemed to know exactly what each child needed. A word of encouragement, a specific piece of advice, or sometimes just a quiet presence. When he reached Tommy's room, Sarah's heart nearly stopped. Tommy was awake, waiting. I knew you'd come back, Tommy whispered excitedly. I've been practicing those moves you showed me. Champions always practice, the hooded figure replied, his voice warm and familiar. Show me what you've got, MVP. Sarah watched as Tommy demonstrated his visualization techniques. The visitor nodded approvingly, then reached into his bag and pulled out something that made Tommy gasp. A basketball, but not just any basketball. This ball was used in Game 6 of the 1998 NBA Finals, the visitor said quietly. The game winner. Keep it as a reminder. Even the biggest victories start with believing in yourself. Tommy's eyes were wide. But that's like the most famous game ever. The last shot. Then you know how important it is, the visitor replied. And remember our deal. This stays between us. Sometimes the best kind of help comes without any spotlight. Sarah quickly ducked into a supply closet as the figure left Tommy's room. Through the crack in the door, she caught a glimpse of something she hadn't seen before. A flash of red and black beneath the hoodie. Chicago Bulls colors. The next morning, the children's ward was buzzing with energy. Marcus was teaching other kids the breathing techniques. Tommy was showing off his special basketball, careful not to mention where it came from. Parents were receiving mysterious calls about reduced medical bills. As Sarah updated her journal, Dr. Thompson stopped by, her desk again. Sarah, he said quietly, have you noticed our recovery rates lately? They're well above the national average. Whatever's happening here, it's more than just gifts and basketball. Sarah looked at her growing collection of notes. "Doctor, I think I'm starting to understand, but there's something bigger going on. These visits, they're happening everywhere. It's like..." Before she could finish, the hospital administrator rushed past, looking flustered. "The media's here," she announced. "Someone leaked a story about mysterious improvements in patient outcomes. They're calling it the Angel Effect." Sarah and Dr. Thompson exchanged worried glances. If the media started digging, would their mysterious visitors stop coming? And why was someone so famous working so hard to keep these visits secret? The answer, as Sarah would soon discover, was more extraordinary than she could have imagined. But for now, she had one more entry to add to her journal. Latest discovery. The Angel Man isn't working alone. This is bigger than one person. This is a mission. Little did she know, she'd just stumbled upon the edge of a secret that would change everything they thought they knew about their mysterious visitor. The media vans appeared outside Hope Memorial like a swarm of white metal bees. Sarah watched from the second-floor window as reporters set up their cameras, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious Angel Man who had been making miracles happen. "They're saying it's some kind of secret government program," Jorge said, joining her at the window. "Others think it's a group of retired athletes. Nobody's even close to the truth." Sarah was about to respond when she heard a commotion from Tommy's room. The boy's morning blood tests had come back, and the news wasn't good. His cancer was becoming more aggressive. "But I've been doing everything right," Tommy protested, his precious Game 6 basketball clutched tightly in his arms. "I've been visualizing, just like he taught me. I've been fighting." Dr. Thompson tried to explain about resistance to chemotherapy, about needing to try different protocols, but Tommy had shut down. For the first time since the Angel Man's visit, the spark in his eyes had dimmed. That night, after shooing away the reporters who tried to sneak into the hospital, Sarah made her usual rounds. She paused outside Tommy's room, hearing quiet sobs. The boy who had been teaching others about hope was finally letting his own fears show. Then, at exactly 11:47 p.m., every electronic device in the hospital flickered. But this time was different. Instead of just the security cameras going dark, the entire building's power system seemed to hiccup. Emergency lights kicked in, bathing the corridors in a soft blue glow. Sarah heard the familiar squeak of basketball, shoes. But the footsteps were moving faster than usual, more purposeful. She followed the sound to Tommy's room and stopped in the doorway, hidden by shadows. The tall figure in the hoodie was already there, sitting on the edge of Tommy's bed. This time, he wasn't wearing the usual dark clothes. Even in the dim light, Sarah could make out a familiar red and black warm-up jacket. "I heard you had a tough day, MVP," the visitor said softly. Tommy sat up, wiping his eyes. "The medicine's not working anymore. I'm losing the game." "Let me tell you something about games," the figure replied, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "I played in 1 through 72 NBA games. You know how many I lost?" Tommy shook his head. 451. That's a lot of losses. But you know what? Each loss taught me something. Made me stronger. Made me work harder. The visitor reached into his gym bag and pulled out a tablet. He pulled up a video. It was Game 5 of the 1997 NBA Finals, the famous flu game. See that player? He could barely stand. Doctors said he shouldn't play, but he knew something important. Sometimes your body might be weak, but your spirit can carry you through. Tommy watched the screen intently. Is that really you?" The figure chuckled softly. "What matters is the lesson. Your body's fighting hard, but your spirit's fighting harder. And just like in basketball, Sometimes you need to adjust your game plan. He pulled out a small notebook and began teaching. Tommy knew visualization techniques, specifically designed for the stronger medicine he'd be starting tomorrow. Think of it like upgrading your moves, the visitor explained. When the defense adjusts, you adjust right back. These new medicines might make you feel sick, but that's just like muscle pain after a hard practice. It means you're getting stronger. Sarah watched in amazement as Tommy's entire demeanor changed. The visitors spent over 20 minutes with him, much longer than usual, teaching him breathing exercises, visualization techniques, and even some modified basketball drills he could do from his bed. "But what if I'm not strong enough?" Tommy whispered. The visitor stood up, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the emergency lights. "Let me tell you another secret. Nobody's strong enough alone. That's why we have teammates. Your doctors, your nurses, your mom, they're all on your team. And so am I." He reached into his bag one last time and pulled out something that made Tommy gasp. A pair of black and red basketball shoes, but not just any shoes. "These aren't for playing in," the visitor said. "These are from my last championship game. Keep them next to your bed. Whenever you feel scared or weak, look at them and remember. Champions aren't people who never face tough times. They're people who never stop fighting, no matter how tough it gets." As the visitor turned to leave, Tommy called out softly, "I know who you are. I won't tell anyone. But why do you do this in secret? You could help so many more kids if people knew." The figure paused at the door. "Because this isn't about me, champ. It's about you. About every kid fighting their own championship game in these hospital rooms. Sometimes the biggest victories are the ones nobody sees." After he left, Sarah slipped into Tommy's room. The boy was holding the shoes reverently, examining the scuffs and marks on them. Proof they weren't just replicas, but the real thing. "Sarah," Tommy whispered excitedly, "did you know he visits other hospitals too? He told me about kids in Chicago and New York, and even Europe, who are all learning these same techniques. We're like a team, all of us, fighting together." The next morning, Tommy's new treatment began. It was harder than the first round, but something had changed. He approached each session like a player preparing for a championship game. He taught other kids his visualization techniques, calling them his teammates in the fight against cancer. More incredibly, similar stories started emerging from other hospitals. Children fighting serious illnesses, all talking about basketball strategies for healing, all receiving mysterious gifts, all showing unprecedented improvement in their fighting spirit. Sarah added more notes to her journal. New discoveries. Visits increasing in frequency. Multiple hospitals involved. Organized support system in place. Connected to 1990s basketball era. Possible network of helpers, as she wrote. Dr. Thompson rushed into the nurses' station waving a medical journal. "Sarah, you need to see this. Someone's published a study about the psychological impact of sports-based visualization techniques in pediatric cancer treatment. The results are revolutionary." Sarah took the journal, her eyes widening as she read. The methodology described was exactly what their mysterious visitor had been teaching Tommy and the others. But how long had this been going on? How many children had been helped? The answer would prove to be more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined. Because somewhere in Chicago, in a private office high above the city, a legend was planning his next series of visits, his secret mission of hope growing bigger by the day. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something much bigger than a series of hospital visits. She decided to partner with Dr. James Wilson, the hospital's head of pediatric research, to investigate the phenomenon more systematically. "Look at this pattern," Sarah said. spreading her journal notes across Dr. Wilson's desk. Every time there's a major basketball game in a nearby city, we get a visit within 48 hours. Dr. Wilson adjusted his glasses, studying the dates. And these improvement rates. They're unprecedented. But it's not just the physical improvements. The psychological impact is remarkable. They were interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. A woman with a microphone and a cameraman were trying to interview Tommy's mother, Maria. "Please, just tell us about the mysterious visitor," the reporter pressed. "Our viewers have a right to know who's behind these miracle recoveries." Maria stood her ground, protecting Tommy, who was behind her in his wheelchair. "The only miracle here is having someone who gives children hope. If you want a story, write about that." Sarah watched as Jorge efficiently escorted the media team out. But the reporter's words stuck with her. Miracle recoveries. The data was starting to support that description. Dr. Wilson pulled up his computer, showing Sarah a spreadsheet. "I've been tracking the recovery rates at hospitals across the country. Look at this: Chicago Children's Hospital, Mayo Clinic, St. Jude's, Boston Children's. They all show the same pattern. Improved recovery rates, reduced anxiety levels, better response to treatment, all following mysterious nighttime visits." Sarah noticed something else in the data. The timing. These visits sometimes happen on the same night in different cities. How is that possible? Unless, Dr. Wilson's eyes widened, unless he's not working alone. They spent the next several hours piecing together evidence. Sarah created a timeline. 995. First reported mysterious visit. Chicago Children's Hospital, 1000. Program expands to 3 more hospitals, 2005. International visits begin 2010. Sports. Psychology techniques integrated into treatment, 2015. Network appears to grow significantly, 2020. System seems fully established across multiple continents. But why keep it secret? Sarah wondered aloud. The impact is incredible. This could revolutionize pediatric care. Maybe that's exactly why, Dr. Wilson replied. The minute this becomes public, it becomes something else. Right now, it's pure. It's about the kids. Their investigation was interrupted by Tommy rolling past the office, dribbling his basketball despite being in a wheelchair. His latest round of treatment had been brutal, but his spirit remained unbroken. "Hey, Dr. Wilson," Tommy called out. "Want to see my new power move? The Angel Man taught it to me last night. It's all about adapting your game when things get tough." Sarah and Dr. Wilson watched as Tommy demonstrated a modified version of a basketball drill, designed to be done while sitting down. Other children in the ward had started copying his movements, turning their physical therapy sessions into what they called championship training. The visualization techniques, Dr. Wilson mused, they're identical to the ones used by elite athletes, but modified for children, made accessible, turned into a game they can understand. Sarah added another note to her journal. Methods suggest professional sports background plus medical knowledge. Possible team of experts. Later that afternoon, Sarah discovered something else. While organizing the hospital's donation records, she found a pattern of anonymous contributions. Each one perfectly matched a family's medical bills, always timed right after a visit. The financial support alone must be in the millions, Dr. Wilson calculated. But it's more than that. Look at these numbers: equipment donations, research funding, facility improvements, all anonymous, all tied to hospitals in the visitation network. As they dug deeper, they found more connections. Basketball courts being built in hospital physical therapy departments. Sports psychologists being quietly added to pediatric oncology teams. Training programs teaching medical staff how to incorporate Visualization techniques into treatment protocols. This isn't just one person's mission anymore, Sarah realized. This is an entire system designed to change how we help sick kids. Their investigation was suddenly interrupted by an urgent call from the children's ward. Tommy's condition had taken a critical turn. His body was rejecting the new treatment protocol. Sarah rushed to his room, finding him clutching his championship game basketball, trying to do his visualization exercises despite the pain. "I'm not giving up," Tommy said through gritted teeth. "Champions don't give up. He taught me that." That night, at exactly 11:47 p.m., something unprecedented happened. Instead of the usual power flicker, the entire hospital systems went dark for a full minute. When the emergency lights came on, Sarah saw not one, but 3 tall figures in hoodies moving through the halls. She followed at a distance, watching as they split up efficiently, each taking a different section of the hospital. Their movements were coordinated, professional. One headed straight for Tommy's room. Through the door's window, Sarah watched as the figure, the original Angel Man, spent over an hour with Tommy, teaching him new techniques for fighting through this latest challenge. But this time, he wasn't just teaching basketball moves. He was sharing something more personal. "You know why I started doing this?" she heard him ask Tommy. "Because someone once told me I couldn't, that I wasn't good enough. But I learned something important. Other people don't get to decide your limits. Only you do." The next morning, Tommy's test results showed a slight improvement. It wasn't a miracle recovery, but it was something else, evidence of a fighting spirit that refused to quit. Dr. Wilson was waiting at Sarah's desk with more news. "I think I found something. All these techniques, these methods, they're part of a larger study, a revolutionary approach to pediatric care that combines sports psychology with traditional treatment. And the lead researcher." He paused, looking around before lowering his voice. "The lead researcher's name has been redacted, but the timeline matches perfectly with." Before he could finish, Sarah's phone buzzed with a news alert. A major sports network was planning an exposé on the Hospital Angel phenomenon. They claimed to have uncovered the identity of the mysterious visitor. Sarah felt her heart sink. If the story broke, would it all end? Would the pure magic of these secret visits be lost in a media circus? But what she didn't know was that the true story was far more extraordinary than any news report could capture. Because this wasn't just about a basketball legend making secret hospital visits. This was about a revolution in healing, sparked by one man's decision to turn his competitive spirit toward a different kind of victory. One measured not in points or championships, but in children's smiles and renewed hope. The news of the upcoming exposé spread through Hope Memorial like wildfire. But for Sarah, there was a more immediate concern. Tommy's condition had deteriorated rapidly overnight. His fever spiked to 104, and the doctors had moved him to intensive care. "His body's fighting the treatment," Dr. Thompson explained to a tearful Maria. "The next 24 hours are critical." Sarah watched from the ICU nursing station as Tommy slept fitfully, his precious Game 6 basketball and championship shoes still by his bedside. The shoes' red and black colors seemed darker in the dim light, like they were holding secrets of their own. "He keeps asking for the Angel Man," Maria whispered, her voice breaking. "He says he needs to learn the next level of fighting techniques." Sarah checked her watch. 10:30 p.m. Would their mysterious visitor risk coming tonight, with news vans camped outside and security on high alert? The hospital administrator had doubled the night staff specifically to prevent any unauthorized visitors. Then she remembered something Tommy had said about his special visitor. Champions show up when things are hardest. At 11:40 p.m., 7 minutes earlier than usual, every electronic device in the ICU began to malfunction. But this time, it wasn't just a flicker. The entire hospital's security system went into reset mode, forcing all the electronic locks to cycle through their backup protocols. In the confusion, Sarah noticed Jorge rushing through the halls, coordinating with other security guards she'd never seen before. They were setting up a perimeter, but not to keep someone out. They were creating a safe corridor for someone to get in. "He's coming," Jorge said as he passed Sarah. "But this time, it's different. He's bringing the whole team." At exactly 11:47 p.m., Sarah heard multiple sets of basketball shoes squeaking on the hospital floors. Not one or three visitors like before, but a whole group. They moved with military precision, each knowing exactly where to go. The main figure, the original Angel Man, headed straight for Tommy's ICU room. This time, he wasn't wearing his usual hoodie. He was dressed in a complete Chicago Bulls warm-up suit, though he still kept his face carefully turned away from the security cameras. "MVP," he called softly, entering Tommy's room. "Heard you were having a tough quarter." Tommy's eyes fluttered open. Despite his fever, his face lit up with recognition. "You came." "Champions don't abandon their teammates," the visitor replied, pulling up a chair. "And you're not just any teammate. You're the star player in this game." For the next hour, Sarah watched through the ICU window as something extraordinary happened. The visitor didn't just teach Tommy new visualization techniques, he shared stories. Real stories. About facing defeat, about playing through pain, about times when giving up seemed like the only option. "You see these shoes?" he said, picking up the championship shoes he'd given Tommy. "They look perfect in photos, but up close you can see every scuff, every mark. Each one tells a story of a fall, a struggle, a moment when continuing seemed impossible. But here's the secret. Those marks aren't signs of weakness. They're proof of strength." As he talked, other members of his team worked throughout the hospital. Sarah glimpsed them through windows and doorways. Medical professionals, athletes, trainers, all working in perfect coordination. Some were consulting with doctors. Others were working with patients, all sharing their expertise. "Your latest test results," the visitor continued, pulling out a medical chart that Sarah hadn't seen before, "show that your body's changing its defense strategy. So we need to adjust our offense." He proceeded to teach Tommy a new set of visualization techniques, ones that Sarah realized were perfectly aligned with his new treatment protocol. The visitor understood not just basketball, but medicine. "How do you know all this?" Tommy asked, his voice weak but curious. The visitor smiled. Sarah could hear it in his voice. "Let's just say I've put together the best team in the world. Not for basketball this time, but for something more important. Because the greatest victory isn't winning a game or scoring points. It's helping warriors like you fight their way back to health." As the night progressed, Tommy's fever began to break. The visitor stayed, teaching him breathing exercises and sharing more stories. About a famous game played while sick, about coming back from injuries that should have ended a career, about finding strength when everything seemed hopeless. "But the most important game I ever played," he told Tommy, "wasn't on any court. It was in a hospital room, watching someone I loved fight a battle bigger than basketball. That's when I learned what real courage looks like." Around 3 a.m., long past the usual visit duration, Tommy finally fell into a peaceful sleep. The visitor stood, adjusting Tommy's blanket with practiced care. "Sarah," he called softly, not turning around. "I know you're there. Come in for a moment." Sarah entered the room, her heart pounding. The visitor still kept his face carefully angled away from her, but she could see his profile. so familiar from countless posters and commercials. "Tretius, media's going to run their story tomorrow," he said. "They think they know what this is about, but they're missing the point. This was never about me or any other player. It's about them." He gestured to Tommy. "About every kid fighting their own championship game in these rooms." He reached into his gym bag and pulled out a folder. "These are the latest research results from our program. Treatment protocols combining sports psychology with traditional medicine. The success rates..." He paused. "Well, you've seen them yourself. We're ready to take it public, but not as a story about a basketball player, as a revolution in pediatric care." Sarah took the folder, understanding dawning. "All this time, you weren't just visiting. You were building something bigger." "The greatest teams," he replied, "are the ones nobody sees. The nurses, the doctors, the parents, and most importantly, the kids themselves. I just helped them see their own strength." As he turned to leave, Sarah noticed something she hadn't before. On his warm-up jacket, partially hidden, was a small logo she didn't recognize. A basketball transformed into a medical cross. The next morning, Tommy's test results showed significant improvement. As news vans continued to gather outside, preparing to break their story about a basketball legend's secret hospital visits, Sarah understood that they were missing the real story. Because somewhere in Chicago, in that office high above the city, a revolution in pediatric care was about to be unveiled. And it had started with one simple idea: that the same spirit that could drive an athlete to greatness could help a child fight their way back to health. But first, there was one more night of magic to come, one more secret to be revealed. And for the children of Hope Memorial, one final lesson about what it truly means to be a champion. The morning brought chaos to Hope Memorial. News vans clogged the parking lot, reporters crowded the entrance, and satellite trucks lined the street. The story was about to break, and everyone wanted to be first with the scoop. Our sources confirm that the mysterious hospital visitor is none other than NBA legend. The television in the children's ward went dark as Sarah quickly hit the power button. "They don't get it," Tommy said from his wheelchair. He was looking stronger today, his color better. "The Angel Man isn't about being famous. He's about helping us fight." The other children nodded in agreement. Emily, now walking with just a slight limp, spoke up. "If they tell everyone, will he stop coming?" Sarah looked at the worry on their faces and remembered what the visitor had said last night about the real story being bigger than basketball. She gathered the children in the playroom, away from the media circus outside. "Let me tell you something about real champions," she said, channeling the spirit of their mysterious friend. "They don't stop fighting just because things get tough. They adapt. They find a new way to win." As if on cue, Dr. Wilson burst into the playroom, waving a thick medical journal. "Sarah, you need to see this. It's being published tomorrow in View, every major medical journal." The article's title made Sarah's heart skip. "The Champion's Spirit: Revolutionary Advances in Pediatric Care Through Sports Psychology Integration." "Look at the methodology," Dr. Wilson said excitedly. "All the techniques, the visualization exercises, the mental training, it's all here. Documented, peer-reviewed, proven effective. And the lead research team..." He lowered his voice, glancing at the children. "It's a who's who of sports medicine and pediatric care." Sarah began to understand. While everyone was focused on the mystery of the nighttime visits, something much bigger had been built right under their noses. A complete system for helping sick children fight their illnesses like athletes training for the biggest game of their lives. The hospital administrator called an emergency staff meeting. The media's running the story at 6 o'clock. We need to be prepared for... She was interrupted by Tommy rolling into the conference room, followed by a parade of other patients. "We want to tell our story first," he announced. "The real story." The administrator looked at the determination on their faces, the same look she'd seen on countless sports posters. "What did you have in mind?" Over the next few hours, something remarkable happened. The children organized themselves like a team preparing for a championship game. Emily coordinated with the younger kids, teaching them how to express their feelings about the Angel Man's impact. Marcus set up a display of all the visualization techniques they'd learned. Lisa organized their collection of inspirational letters and gifts. "See, it's like he taught us," Tommy explained to a group of doctors. "You have to show, not just tell. When you're down by 2 points in the final seconds, you don't talk about taking the shot. You take it." At 5:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the big news story was set to break, Hope Memorial's main lobby was transformed. Children in wheelchairs and hospital gowns had set up stations demonstrating their fighting techniques. Parents shared stories of miraculous recoveries. Doctors presented data showing unprecedented improvement rates. "This isn't just about one famous person visiting sick kids," Tommy announced to the gathered media. "This is about teaching us how to be champions in the biggest game of our lives." The reporters watched in amazement as children demonstrated their visualization exercises, sharing how they imagined their medicines as power-ups and their treatments as training sessions. Parents spoke about mysterious medical bills being paid and new treatment options appearing just when hope seemed lost. "The Angel Man taught us that true champions aren't born, they're built," Marcus said, demonstrating his breathing exercises. "Built through hard work, determination, and never giving up." At exactly 5:55 p.m., something unexpected happened. Hospitals across the country began broadcasting similar scenes. Children in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and beyond, all sharing the same message. This wasn't just one person's mission. This was a revolution in how to help sick kids fight their battles. The original news story about a basketball legend's secret identity was quickly overshadowed by something more powerful. The story of thousands of young champions fighting their illnesses with the heart of athletes and the support of an invisible team. As the evening wore on, Sarah noticed something interesting. The children weren't just telling their stories, they were teaching others, passing on the lessons they'd learned, just like their mysterious mentor had done for them. "You see," Tommy explained to a young patient who had just been admitted, "it's not about whether you win or lose. It's about how hard you fight. And when you fight like a champion, you're never really fighting alone." At 11:47 p.m., as the media circus finally began to die down, the hospital's lights flickered one more time. But this time, no one ran to investigate. The children just smiled, knowing that somewhere in the building, their Angel Man was watching, proud of how his team had handled the pressure. Because, in the end, the real story wasn't about unmasking a mystery visitor. It was about understanding that sometimes the greatest achievements happen in the quietest moments, when no cameras are rolling and no crowds are cheering. Sometimes, true greatness is found in a child finding the strength to face one more treatment, take one more step, or inspire one more friend to keep fighting. As Sarah made her final rounds that night, she found Tommy adding something to the bulletin board in the children's ward. A new sign that read, "Champions Training Ground, where every battle is a championship game." "The Angel Man said something to me last night," Tommy told her with a knowing smile. "He said the greatest victory of his career wasn't any of his championships. It was seeing kids like us learn to be champions in our own way. Sarah nodded, understanding that tomorrow would bring even bigger revelations. But for tonight, in the quiet halls of Hope Memorial, the most important lesson had already been learned. That the heart of a champion beats in many forms, and sometimes the greatest legends are the ones that work their magic in secret. The next morning, Hope Memorial woke to a world that had changed. The front page of every newspaper carried the same headline, but it wasn't the exposé everyone had expected. Instead, it was something far more meaningful. Michael Jordan unveils Global Children's Health Initiative. Champions of Hope, Sarah, walked into the hospital to find the children gathered around Tommy, who was reading from a tablet. For the past 25 years, basketball legend Michael Jordan has been secretly building more than just a program of hospital visits. Working with medical experts, sports psychologists, and a team of dedicated athletes, he has developed a revolutionary approach to pediatric care that combines the mental toughness of elite athletes with cutting-edge medical treatment. But the real story was happening in the hospital's main conference room. There, on a large screen, Michael Jordan himself was addressing children in hospitals around the world. This time, there was no hoodie, no shadows, just the familiar face that had inspired generations, now speaking directly to his youngest champions. "Some of you know me as the Angel Man," he began, his voice carrying the same warmth that had comforted countless children in dark hospital rooms. "But the truth is, you're the real angels. You're the ones showing the world what true courage looks like." Tommy wheeled himself to the front of the room, his Game 6 basketball in his lap. The other children gathered around him as Jordan continued. 25. Years ago, I visited a children's hospital in Chicago. I met a young girl who was fighting cancer, and she asked me something I'll never forget. She said, "Mr. Jordan, you win all your games. Can you teach me how to win mine?" The room was silent as Jordan's voice filled with emotion. That night changed everything. I realized that all the mental training, all the visualization techniques, all the strategies we use in sports, they could help kids fight their illnesses. But it had to be done right. It had to be about them, not about me. Images began playing on the screen, secret midnight visits, training sessions with medical staff, research meetings with doctors, years of work, all happening behind the scenes. "We built something bigger than basketball," Jordan explained. "A team of doctors, athletes, researchers, and most importantly, brave kids like you. Every story you shared, every battle you fought, helped us develop better ways to help others." Dr. Wilson stood up, adding to the presentation. "The research data is extraordinary. Patients using these techniques show significantly better outcomes. The psychological benefits alone are revolutionary. But more importantly, it gives children a way to actively participate in their healing process." Sarah watched as Tommy raised his hand. Jordan smiled on the screen. "I see you, MVP. What's your question?" "Why reveal everything now?" Tommy asked. "Why not keep it a secret?" "Because you're ready," Jordan replied. "All of you. You've proven that this isn't about one person visiting hospitals. It's about a whole team of champions helping each other fight. And now it's time to share these techniques with every kid facing tough battles." The screen shifted to show hospitals around the world. Children in London, Tokyo, Sydney, and dozens of other cities, all practicing the same visualization techniques, all part of the same team. "From today," Jordan announced, "every children's hospital in the world will have access to our program. Every child fighting an illness will have these tools, these techniques, this support system. The midnight visits won't stop. They'll multiply. Because I'm not the only athlete who wants to help. There's a whole team of champions ready to join our mission. He held up a familiar object, a basketball transformed into a medical cross, the logo Sarah had glimpsed on his jacket. This is the symbol of our new foundation, Champions of Hope. Because that's what all of you are. Champions who never stop fighting, who inspire others, who show us what real courage looks like. Tommy looked at his championship shoes, then at his Game 6 basketball. So, all this time, you were building more than just a secret program. You were building a movement. That's right, MVP, Jordan smiled. And you're all part of it. Every kid who learned these techniques, who passed them on to others, who never gave up. You're the real stars of this team. The presentation ended with an announcement that shook the medical world. The Jordan Foundation was committing billions to pediatric care, promising to cover treatment costs for children worldwide. The visualization program would be integrated into standard medical protocols. The midnight visits would become part of an organized system of athlete mentorship. But for the children at Hope Memorial, the biggest revelation wasn't about money or programs. It was simpler than that. As Tommy explained to a news crew later that day, everyone thinks this story is about Michael Jordan secretly visiting sick kids. But it's really about something bigger. It's about learning that inside every one of us is the heart of a champion. Sometimes we just need someone to help us find it. That night, at exactly 11:47 p.m., the hospital lights flickered one last time. But when Sarah rushed to Tommy's room, she found something different. Instead of a single visitor in a hoodie, there were several athletes, all wearing Champions of Hope jackets. Each one ready to teach, to inspire, to help children fight their battles. The secret's out, Tommy grinned, but the magic's still here. 5 years later, Sarah Chen stood in the new Champions of Hope wing at Hope Memorial. The walls were lined with photos, not of Michael Jordan, but of the children who had fought their battles like champions. Tommy's picture held a special place of honor. Now cancer-free, he had become a youth basketball coach, teaching sick kids the same visualization techniques that had helped him survive. The mysterious nighttime visits had evolved into something extraordinary, a worldwide network of athletes, doctors, and survivors, all working together to change how children face illness. The Angel Man's identity was no longer a secret, but his true legacy wasn't about who he was. It was about what he helped others become. Because in hospitals around the world, children were learning the most important lesson of all, that sometimes the greatest victories don't happen on a basketball court. They happen in quiet hospital rooms where young champions fight their battles with the heart of an athlete and the support of a team that believes in miracles. And somewhere in Chicago, in that office high above the city, Michael Jordan smiled as he read the latest success rates. The secret was out, but the mission continued. Because true champions know that the real victory isn't in keeping secrets, it's in sharing hope. And there you have it, friends. The incredible story of how one basketball legend changed pediatric care forever, one secret visit at a time. We'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Share your location in the comments below and let us know if there are similar stories of hope in your local hospitals. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button. And for more inspiring stories about sports legends making a difference, check out the video appearing on your screen right now. Remember, sometimes the greatest champions are the ones working their magic behind the scenes.